Good evening, Nigeria. Tonight, a region holds its breath, and the numbers, both political and military, tell a story far bigger than a single border. In the past hours, West Africa has witnessed a seismic jolt, a coup attempt in Benin Republic, a nation we often consider stable, quiet, and predictable. Yet, suddenly, the calm cracked. President Bola Tinubu writes to the Senate seeking approval to deploy the Nigerian troops across the border, a request that signals urgency and raises eyebrows simultaneously. Why? Because for once, Nigeria moved at lightning speed, mobilizing fighter jets, coordinating joint forces, and standing shoulder to shoulder with a neighbor under threat. But then comes the contrast. The Alliance for Democratic Congress warns that if we can move this fast for Benin Republic, why not for banditry tearing through our own community? A question many Nigerians whisper but rarely ask aloud. And the presidency fires back, insisting that fighting terrorists at home is not as straightforward as confronting rebels in Benin Republic. Layers of politics, intelligence, terrain, logistics, each more complicated than the last. Meanwhile, the world is actually watching as the UN Secretary General expresses concern, reminding everyone that West Africa's democratic fabric is thinning. One coup here, another rumbling there, and suddenly regional stability becomes a fragile equation. But tonight, there's relief, at least for now. The Nigerian Armed Forces, or the Nigerian Air Force jets, and a multinational force push back the coup plotters. Cotonou breathes easier now. Benin Republic's president steps forward to say the situation is under control, constitutional order restored, and Tinubu hailing it as a victory for democracy. But here on Viewpoint, we ask the harder question. What does this rapid response reveal about our priorities, our politics, and the balance of power in West Africa? Because behind every headline lies a number of troops deployed, minutes of response time, political capital spent, civilians' lives on the line, and numbers never lie, even when politicians actually do. Tonight, we break it all down, not just what happened, but what it means. This is Viewpoint. I'm your host, Odiawa AI. Join us shortly. Tonight, a coup attempt in a neighboring state has triggered a political shockwave that is now exploding inside Nigeria. A letter to the Senate, a deployment request, a regional firestorm, and question many Nigerians are now asking, why does our government move like lightning speed abroad but walks in crutches at home? Welcome once again. This is Viewpoint, and I'm your host, Odiawa AI. Let's begin with the facts because the story is dramatic all by itself. A group of soldiers calling themselves the Committee for Refoundation storms the national TV station. Their leader, Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri, a former member of President Patrice Talon's own security detail, a former artillery battalion commander, he announces Talon is removed, the government is dissolved, state institutions suspended. For a moment, it looked like another domino in West Africa's coup cascade. Then something unusual happened. Nigeria moved fast. Air support, combat patrols, ground coordination, joint operations under ECOWAS. By afternoon, the coup was over, repelled and neutralized. Benin Republic thanked Nigeria. Talon declared the situation under control. Then UN, ECOWAS, everybody exhaled. A clean intervention, almost too clean. Now, let's get political. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu wrote to the Senate seeking approval to deploy Nigerian troops to Benin Republic. He cited Section 30, subsection 5 of the 1999 Constitution. No member of the armed forces shall be deployed on combat duty outside Nigeria without the approval of the Senate. It's the first time in months that this constitutional path is being highlighted so loudly. Urgency, legality, regional leadership. Now, Akpabio, without wasting time, sent it to the committee of the whole floor. Expedited consideration, he actually did. Those words, expedited considerations, are rare in Nigerian politics, but that raises a question. If we can expedite military deployment abroad, why can't we expedite security within Nigeria? Now, let's hold our thoughts a bit. The African Democratic Congress hits the nail. They slam the hammer hard on the nail. Based on contradictions, Bolaji Abdullahi asked if Nigeria could respond decisively to threats across our borders, why has it failed to act in similar manner based on urgency at home? Let's pause there. Because at home, bandits are killing citizens, terrorists are abducting children, school children to be specific, and communities are paying ransom like taxes. Yet in Benin Republic, there was a distress. Nigeria was airborne in ours. ADC calls this out. They remind us that during the crisis in Guinea-Bissau, when even a former Nigerian president was endangered, Nigeria did not move swiftly. Their argument is simple. True regional leadership isn't selective. You defend democracy abroad and security at home. This is where public opinion is actually split. Some praise Tinubu for showing regional strength. Others say charity begins at home. But those have a point, or both sides have a point rather. But one side is actually bleeding. Now here comes Bayo Onanuga, special advisor to the president. He says, and I quote, "Stop comparing Benin Republic rescue missions to Nigeria's internal insecurity." Why? Because one is the conventional attack and the other is an asymmetric war. He argues further, terrorists use civilian hostages as shield. Bandits hide in forest. Strike soft is actually targeted. You can't bomb what you cannot see. You cannot fire missiles when kidnapped victims are tied to trees. Now, he compares Nigeria's struggle to America's difficulty with guerrillas in Afghanistan, just to mention a few in the Middle East. Now, strategically, we might say this is valid, but tactically, Nigerians don't want comparison. They want safety. Numbers actually matter here. 10 minutes to respond to Cotonou, 10 years of insecurity in Zamfara, Kaduna, and Niger states, just to mention a few states plagued with insecurity. That contrast is too sharp to ignore. Zooming out, way out, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres reacts swiftly. He concerns deeply, and he actually condemned the coup, warning of regional instability. This is the 5th major coup or attempted coup in West Africa in 2 years. Now let's count. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea-Bissau, now an attempt in Benin Republic. Now this is practically 5 in 2 years. That's not politics, that's contagion. Guterres says the UN, ECOWAS, AU, both regional and continental bodies, likewise the global body, are all working to restore constitutional order. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The region is tired of statements, people want results, and ECOWAS needs a win here. Benin Republic actually needs a win. Nigeria has delivered that win. The question is, can Nigeria replicate the decisiveness internally or only abroad? The political weight of this moment is enormous. Nigeria's fast intervention in Benin proves two things simultaneously. Number one, the Nigerian military can move fast. Secondly, the Nigerian state chooses when to move fast. This is what shapes public anger because numbers don't lie. It took hours to support Benin Republic. It has taken years to solve banditry, abductions, and also taken minutes to solve terrorists who have kidnapped school children. Now it takes months for government to actually respond. And that's the core political tension. Capacity is not the problem here. Political prioritization actually is. Which leads to the bigger geopolitical question. Is Nigeria fighting to save democracy or fighting to save its face on a continental note? Here's my view. Nigeria cannot afford a foreign policy that is stronger than its own domestic policy. You cannot project power abroad while citizens feel unprotected at home. You cannot deploy fighter jets for neighbors and deploy condolences for Nigerians. You cannot talk about constitutional order abroad while communities at home experience constitutional abandonment. Urgency is not a foreign policy, it is a national requirement. When we turn to Cotonou again, where relief is finally setting in after dramatic 24 hours. Nigeria's Air Force and a joint regional team repelled coup plotters. Benin Republic's president now says the situation is under control and the President Tinubu is hailing the swift intervention that restored constitutional order in record time. But behind those headlines are the numbers, the timing, and the geopolitical weight that tell a much deeper story. Join us shortly. You're welcome back. Now, gunfire in Cotonou, the Benin Republic capital, explosions in the afternoon, a group of soldiers announcing the fall of a government on state television. And then in just a few hours, regional standby force and a constitutional order dragged back from the edge. But what we witnessed in Benin Republic, ladies and gentlemen, is more than a failed coup. It's another chapter in a growing pattern. A pattern that is slowly squeezing Nigeria from every side and raising one uncomfortable question. How long can democracy survive in a neighborhood where coups are becoming the political currency here? Breaking it down, at 5 a.m. near President Patrice Talon's residence, gunfire erupted. By 6:15, 8 soldiers led by Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri appeared on television claiming they had overthrown the government. They dissolved state institutions and suspended the constitution, and they declared themselves the Military Committee for Refoundation. But here's the twist. Barely when the calm had actually finished, looping on TV when 3 aircrafts quietly pierced the Beninese airspace from Nigeria. 2 jets from Lagos, one headed towards Kainji. This was not a panic scramble. This was choreography. Sources say that the Nigerian Air Force executed 30 minutes of coordinated strikes, targeted fleeing hostile elements. French aircraft maintained surveillance. The Beninese loyalist soldiers advanced on the ground. Now, it was a clear 3-layer pushback: air precision, ground containment, and external surveillance. And by dusk, a presidential advisor said Talon was safe, the rebels contained, and the coup foiled. But let's be clear, this was not just some Benin operation. This was Nigeria stepping deeper into regional security leadership. The rebels' complaints wasn't simple ambition. They cited deteriorating security in northern Benin Republic, neglect of dead soldiers and their families, cuts in healthcare, cancellation of state-funded kidney dialysis, tax rises, restriction on political activity. These are not fringe grievances. These are structural pressure points that exist across almost every democracy within West Africa. Benin's democracy, 35 years old, has been praised for economic reforms, but ask the families of soldiers killed fighting jihadists near Niger and Burkina Faso borders, and you'll hear the same story. The state doesn't listen. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where the coups actually germinates, in silence between citizens and their governments. Let's talk about the numbers. Between 2020 and now, West Africa has recorded 5 coups: Mali 2020, Guinea 2021, Burkina Faso 2022, Niger 2023, Guinea-Bissau 2025, and now a threatened coup in Benin Republic 2025. Additionally, 6 coups in 5 years. Across Africa, over 100 coups between 1960 and 2020, and 10 successful ones in just the last 5 years. This is not just democratic recession, it is a democratic collapse zone, particularly in West Africa. Nigeria is suddenly the last major democratic standing nation between a belt of juntas stretching across the Sahel region from Mali, Burkina Faso to Niger, and now brushing the borders of Benin Republic. We are actually surrounded psychologically, economically, and strategically. And every new coup attempt, even when foiled, feeds a dangerous narrative. If civilian governments fail to govern, the military will actually try to govern. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Coups do not start when soldiers pick up guns. Coups actually start when citizens lose faith in the democratic process. A constitutional lawyer, Mike Ozekome, puts it bluntly: military regimes never solve anything. Their early excitement evaporates fast. But the warning signs appear when governments fail to deliver security, justice, and inclusion. Security analysts agree with this. People don't just wake up one morning and support a military takeover. They get pushed to the point where they ask, what else do we try? Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Guinea, and now Benin Republic all now followed similar pattern. Weak governance, insecurity, resentment, military exploitation, and coup attempts. Nigeria cannot afford to join that league or that list. President Tinubu hailed the Nigerian armed forces, and rightly so. They responded swiftly, professionally, and legally under ECOWAS protocols. But let's ask the deeper question. If Nigeria can deploy jets across borders within hours, why can't we deploy the same urgency against bandits in Zamfara, like I said earlier on, Borno, Kebbi, Katsina? The government says it's because internal operations are symmetric. Terrorists use civilians as shields, which is a fair point. but perception matters. If Nigeria sees rapid action abroad but delayed action at home, trust begins to erode. And remember, eroding trust is actually oxygen for coup attempts, even if they never succeed. Now, let me make something very clear. Democracy isn't destroyed by soldiers. Democracy is destroyed by governance failures that make soldiers look like an alternative. Every coup in the last 5 years traced back to similar roots: bad governance, corruption, insecurity, inequality, weakened institutions, shrinking political space. If these issues remain unaddressed or unattended to, military interventions will keep popping up like wildfires. The African Union continental body said it, the United Nations, the global body, has said it, and regional bloc ECOWAS has said similar thing likewise, and constitutional experts say it too. You want to stop coups, deliver governance, real governance, and not slogans. Benin Republic is calm. Cotonou, the capital, is breathing again. President Talon says everything is under control. But the region is not under control, and the continent is not under control either. The crisis of governance, the fuel feeding these coups, is certainly not under control. The Nigerian jets that flew into Benin may have extinguished one fire, but unless West African leaders address the deeper roots, insecurity, poverty, corruption, exclusion, that fire will burn again. Maybe not in Benin Republic, maybe not tomorrow, but somewhere else, and probably soon. So the question remains, how many more warnings do we need before we fix what's breaking our democracies? Wrapping up tonight from Cotonou to Abuja, from the Senate floor to the corridors of ECOWAS, the message has been unmistakable. Democracy in West Africa is standing, but is standing on shaky ground. A coup attempt in Benin Republic, a presidential request for troops deployment, a nation applauding swift intervention abroad while demanding equal urgency at home. Even the UN raising its voices based on concerns. Yes, the Beninese president says the situation is under control. Yes, Nigerian air power helped repel the coup plotters in record time. Commander-in-Chief is hailing a job well done, but beneath the headline lies the truth we can't escape. Every coup attempt is not just a story, it's a warning. A reminder that governance, security, and public trust are now the real battlegrounds, and West Africa cannot bomb its way out of these insecurities. So as the dust settles in Cotonou, the real question comes home. Will Nigeria defend democracy abroad while strengthening it at home, or will it keep winning battles on foreign soil while losing confidence at home? I've been your host, Odiawa AI for Viewpoint. You'll do well to follow us across our social media platforms. Thanks for watching.